We're going to get Tom Slater's view on what our next guest has to say. Peace in Ukraine. Well, we had a truce, or did we, over Easter, announced by Vladimir Putin. That is well and truly over. Did it ever really begin? And will we actually get the peace in the next week that apparently Donald Trump thinks he could get? Let's talk about this with Sir Bill Browder. He's, of course, Putin's #1 foreign enemy and head of the global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. Very good morning, Sir Bill.
Good morning to you.
I mean, let's remember that Donald Trump talked about how he was going to get peace in Ukraine on day #1. Well, that's not worked out very well. It's no longer January. It is now mid-April. Do you think there is any chance at all there's going to be a peace deal this week? And what would it consist of?
I don't think there's going to be any peace deal this week. And the simple reason is because Putin has no reason to do a peace deal. Putin has started this war back in 2022 with very ambitious goals. He has not in any way modified or reduced his goals. And so there's no reason to think that in a situation where he feels like he's winning, he's going to do a peace deal. I just don't see that happening. And so the only thing that he did, the only concession that he made was to, when Donald Trump asked for a 30-day unconditional ceasefire, after a month, he came up with a 30-hour, very conditional ceasefire, which wasn't a ceasefire. And so I think it's all total fantasy that there's going to be any peace deal. I think that it's not going to happen. And I think that we're still stuck in this whole mess of Vladimir Putin attacking the Ukrainians and threatening the rest of the world.
Yeah, I mean, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and indeed Donald Trump said over the end of last week and over the weekend, basically they'll walk away from this if they don't get a deal. But this is the issue. When you put a time constraint on it and you basically say, I'm making it my mission, I'm going to be the guy who brings peace to Ukraine. He's put all of the, the balls well and truly, all the cards on the table, all in Putin's court. I'm mixing all my metaphors. And Putin can just sit there and wait. But you say he doesn't want peace now. Look, he's not winning as such. He's still only got 20% of Ukrainian territory, 20%. But he is, we talk about that meat grinder. He is losing far more men than Ukraine is, although he's got access to more men whose bodies he can throw onto the battlefield and care not a jot about. But we know his economy is in a terrible state. It's now entirely geared up on the war economy. Is there a part of him that will actually want some sort of ceasefire so that he can kind of regroup, get his military, get his economy back on track?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is that he's not accountable to anybody in his country. He's not living in a country like we live in, where if you lose a bunch of soldiers, you lose your job, or if the economy goes down, you lose your job. He's a dictator. Everybody's afraid of him. He's not going to lose his job. And so from his perspective, he's looking at this whole thing and he's saying, well, look at Donald Trump is giving me everything I want. Why he's now, most importantly, going to cut off Ukraine from U.S. military aid. This is a great moment. For him, he's already sacrificed, close to 1 million soldiers. Why not keep it going and seeing if everybody else folds along with Trump? I think that's his position right now.
And when you talk about 1 million, again, Donald Trump always talks about millions have died. Of course, it's more than millions who were injured, in some catastrophically, but the deaths are in the sort of low hundreds of thousands, more of them on the Russian side than the Ukrainian side, which I think is very, very telling. There is a risk with Donald Trump, isn't there, when Putin's dealing with him? We saw how Donald Trump treated Zelensky, and I thought outrageously, and you and I have discussed that before in the White House and since. But there's also an element where we sort of say, oh, well, he's, kowtowing an awful lot to Putin. But he can turn on a dime, Donald Trump. He can just change his mind and act very, very differently. Is there a risk that if Putin doesn't come to the table with something vaguely resembling a serious negotiating position, other than I get the whole of Ukraine, which seems to be his position, that actually Donald Trump could grow tired of him and actually feel the need to step up support for Ukraine, basically to shore up his own position?
Well, if you take like 5 steps back, not watching any of this whole thing and how Donald Trump has behaved towards Putin, you could say, well, yes, he's a very volatile character. Yes, he turns on a dime, all that kind of stuff. But he's shown no indication at any point whatsoever of wanting to take a tough stand with Putin. I mean, it's the body language, the regular language, everything is so clear. when people said, well, Putin is delaying and he's prevaricating, Donald Trump, instead of saying getting mad at Putin, he says, well, yeah, I do that sometimes as well. And so it's very difficult to imagine, based on what we know, what we've seen so far, him getting tough on Russia. I just don't see that happening. I could be proven wrong, and I'd love to be proven wrong. And so would a lot of Americans love to be proven wrong on that. But so far, Donald Trump has shown an immense kind of friendship towards Putin and animosity towards Ukraine, animosity towards the European Union, animosity towards Western liberal democracies.
Yeah.
And so it's very hard to imagine that all of a sudden he's going to change and become a human rights defender.
Yes, it is extraordinary. Just finally, how much do you think this ties in at all with his treatment of China and the tariff war? And again, every other country getting brought into that as well. But in terms of, was it 145% tariffs? I've lost track. What is it this week on China? In terms of trying to leave China out in the cold, China, of course, helping Russia with their funding, buying Russian oil and the like, and obviously concerns about, control in the South China Seas. How much does this all tie in, do you think?
Well, again, if one wants to be incredibly generous towards Trump, you could say, well, he's trying to, separate Russia from China. And that's the whole point of this. And he's saying that China is the bigger enemy and not Russia. But again, I don't buy that. At the end of the day, China is benefiting hugely from Russia. Russia is not going to stop selling oil to China. In fact, Russia is friendly with China. Russia is friendly with Iran. Russia is friendly with North Korea, which are all, in theory, historically been the United States enemies. And so none of I don't think that he's playing four-dimensional chess. I think he's playing tic-tac-toe here, and he's not doing a very good job.
So Bill Browder, so appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Again, I find Trump's opinion on Putin and on Russia and Ukraine utterly bewildering. What do you think's going on?
No, it's a strange one, isn't it? I mean, almost when you had that big bust-up between Trump and Zelensky, the way in which he was talking about Putin and Russia was like, we've been through a lot together. I think because
people are told lies about Putin.
Yeah,
How
so
awful.
Therefore they kind of relate to one another. Clearly, they've always had just personally a strange kind of connection. And there was also this kind of sense in which, because the Democrats went after him so much over Russiagate, this nonsense that he was some kind of Manchurian candidate, it has almost just, the partisanship of that has clouded his judgment, to put it lightly. That said, the last thing that Trump wants to look like in life and in politics is a sucker, is someone who's being played. And if it does get to the point where he keeps saying, oh, Putin wants peace, I want peace, we're going to strike a peace deal here, and you still see them breaking ceasefires, or you still see them continuing to up their aggression. At what point does he think, maybe I'm looking like the one who's being played here? I don't know.
I know, that's always my hope, that he would realise it was just he was being publicly humiliated himself. But again, since an awful lot of it, what he and his envoy, Steve Witkoff, spout, are just utterly made up, pretend facts about Ukraine. It doesn't bode very well. Love to hear your thoughts on that.